Good morning. My name is Cal, and I'm your presenter today for Market Research 101. Happy to have you on board this morning, and we'll get right to it here. So this is Market Research 101, define and find your customers. But first, we get an advertisement for SCORE. As you can see on the slide, SCORE is the nation's largest network of volunteers. People like me who have spent years in the business world, who work as volunteers with people like you, who are presumably thinking about spending years in the business world, hopefully on your own account. And that's why you're here today and why you're engaged with SCORE. So we're a resource partner of the Small Business Administration. And we have worked with people such as yourself for a number of years, since 1964, to help aspiring entrepreneurs and startup business people be more successful. That was the purpose of the program when it was started, was to increase the probability of success for people like y'all. And it's been successful. So here in Nashville, our Nashville chapter, we have about 50 people who do this in various capacities, mentors or counselors, workshops like the one you're currently attending. We actually have our own TV show, which is kind of cool. And we have a website where you can find a lot of free resources and sign up for workshops like this one, which presumably you did, and therefore I'm going to assume you know about the website. So if all you've done on the website is sign up for a workshop, I would recommend you go back to the website and look at all the other resources that are there, particularly things like templates for building business models and building business plans, doing pro forma P&Ls and stuff like that. Those things are there. They're for your use, no charge, and they're very helpful when you're trying to, start a business. So lots of information on the site you can use. And if you don't have a mentor, I would highly recommend that you get one. If you are an aspiring entrepreneur, you're just in the concept stage, or if you have a small business that you just started and you're starting to realize that running a small business is a handful, a mentor can definitely help you. So your mentor is ostensibly assigned for life, which basically what that means is that when you and your mentor reach a point where you no longer believe that the relationship is bringing value to either one of you, then the relationship ends. No harm, no foul, it's all good. Never any charge to our clients for giving you what I think we would all like to believe anyway, valuable information and help you be more successful. And if you've got your business up and running and you feel like you need like a board of directors, we would not act in that capacity, but we would be willing to put an advisory board together for you to help you with your strategy and addressing growth issues and stuff like that. So that's a service that we provide. We provide those two services together with things like workshops, like the one you're in attendance on. And here's a list of some of the more frequently given workshops that we provide. Including Are You Ready to Start a Business, which is a really good one. If you have not yet started your business, I would recommend you take that workshop because it will challenge you to think about your motivation and if you're really willing to accept the challenge of running your own business. And if you conclude at the end of that you are, then there are other helpful workshops that will help you do that, including develop a business model, write a business plan, do your financial projections and that kind of stuff. So all good resources, all free resources, well, mostly free. Some of these workshops, there's a small fee for some of those workshops, but all there for you to help you be successful. So I encourage you to avail yourself of those resources. And so my name is Cal. Real briefly about myself. I'm a graduate of the University of Memphis. I have a degree in finance. I was in the corporate world in various capacities for 35 years. I ended up running a relatively, I ended up running two small operating units of a conglomerate My first business was about a $30 million a year business, 15 employees, and then indirects in manufacturing, selling products, industrial products, B2B products across the United States. My second operating division was a business with about $130 million in turnover every year. 7 manufacturing facilities, 1 in China, 1 in Mexico, roughly 400 employees. Again, industrial products, B2B markets. And so I have done time in the corporate world as a finance guy, as a marketing guy, as a product development guy, as a sales management guy, and as a general management guy with P&L responsibility for 2 different operating divisions. So that's kind of who I am and my background. Marketing was always one of my favorite things to do. Running a business was actually my least favorite thing to do, but it was more lucrative. But marketing was always one of my favorite things to do. And so when I left the workaday world and got involved with SCORE, this focusing on marketing was what I wanted to do. So here I am. So I see that we have 50, how many people we got on board? 11? Cool. So that's a little bit about me. I would ask some of you, all of you, any of you, to give me a quick bio of yourself. And more importantly, tell me a little bit about your business or your business idea. And within the context of your business idea, tell me who you think your target market is based on location, demographics, how those target customers may behave, and how they may think. So a little bit of a challenge to you to see if you thought through the idea of who your target market is as you go into the process of starting or running a business. And so I'll take a volunteer. Anybody who wants to jump in, do so. Come on, don't be shy. I'll make it a lot more fun if you speak up. Come on, man. No? Nobody?
Feel free to share in the chat if you'd like. All of you have the ability of sharing. The more you share with Cobb, the closer to what you're doing, the examples will be. So it is on your best interest to share with Cobb your business ideas so that as he presents the topic, it relates to what you're doing.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hi, my name is Rochelle Clayton. I just moved to the Nashville area, and I've had a business before, but it failed. And you know what I'm saying? I learned from my mistakes, and now I'm just trying to move forward in the beauty business. And my business is target, for the most part, is like anybody, men and women. I'm looking to start like a beauty supply store for all, you know what I'm saying? Because I know how everyone runs around and they get their products from a different, like different retailers. And I want to make it like a one-stop shop. And the area, from the data that I've been getting at the Nashville area, is they have some beauty stuff going, but they don't have it a lot going on. It's kind of bland down here. So what I can bring is diversity, unity in one place. And I'm just trying to see if I can uplift the community with that. Anything else you had asked? I'm sorry that I didn't cover it.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Rochelle. Thanks, Rochelle.
Hey, no problem.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Somebody. Anybody? All right. We'll move on. Thank you, Rochelle. Let's see, we'll move on. I have this happen to me sometime. There we go. Okay, so here's what we're going to try to accomplish today. We're going to talk about defining target markets. Keep in mind that you may have more than one target market. You may have several target markets. And if you, in fact, figure that out, that you do have more than one market that is a potential client base for you, then you may have different marketing strategies depending on those markets. So the way you approach those markets, the value proposition that you bring to those markets might be completely different, as well as your channel structure, your advertising, all that stuff that rolls up in the marketing strategy may be different. So just keep in mind that as we go through this and you start thinking about things, you may realize, oh, I have more than one target market, and maybe the way I reach those markets is going to be different. Now we're going to talk about, once you define your markets, okay, then you need to figure out the market potential. Sometimes referred to as scalability. How big is your market potential? Another way of thinking about that is, does this, based on my research into my target markets and my market potential, does my business model even make sense? Do I have a viable business plan here? So you need to know what your market potential is after you've identified your market, and you need to figure that out through research. So that's primarily what we're going to focus on today, is how you research what any given market that you've identified's potential may be. And then we're going to talk about using that information, how you use that information to project your revenues. So as you're going through the process of starting a business, presumably you come up with an idea, you've thought about who you're going to sell this stuff to, or services to, and you've thought about what this business is going to look like, and you maybe have worked on a business model, and you maybe have worked on a business plan. And in that business plan, you may have worked on forecasting revenues and expenses, pro forma P&L. Hopefully, you'll do that at some point if you haven't already. What this will do is help you make a more intelligent and data-supported projection on your revenues. So when people put together pro forma financial statements in the process of starting a business, for the most part, expenses are easily identified and easily quantified. So you know what your expense structure is going to look like. The hard part is what your revenues are going to look like. And obviously your revenues need to, at the very minimum, offset your expenses. So it's really important when you're putting your plan together that you have a revenue projection that you can support with logic and data. And so that's what I'm going to try to help you do. And then we're going to talk about some other stuff, peripheral stuff that you need to take into consideration after you've done this, what I call indirect research, which is basically what we're going to talk about, okay? And so my hope is that through this research, you will improve your likelihood of success in your business, and you will be able to project your initial sales volume so that your financial structure looks sound, okay? So I'm going to start by identifying market potential. So first thing you got to do is find your market or markets. Then we're going to talk about three little concepts here that are interrelated: total available market, serviceable available market, serviceable obtainable market. I'll try to make it a little easy for you. I got a slide for each of these, but just real quick. Total available market would be the global market for your product or service. If you have no barriers, that's TAM. Serviceable available market puts the first primary constraint on your business, which is geographic constraints. What's your reach? How big is your footprint? Is your footprint Davidson County? Is your footprint Middle Tennessee? Nine counties in Middle Tennessee? Is it the state of Tennessee? Is it Southeast US? Is it United States? Is it Western Hemisphere? Serviceable addressable market is the first distill down on target market, and that is geographic, right? What can you reach? And then obtainable market, serviceable obtainable market takes into consideration that you don't operate in a vacuum, you've got competition. How much of the market in the area that you've identified is your market area are you able to obtain given the competitive nature of the marketplace? So TAM, SAM, SOM. So let's first talk about what a target market is. Got the definition there for you. Target market is a group of potential customers that share similar characteristics. So a group of potential customers who share similar characteristics. And those characteristics can be identified, and by identifying them, you segment the market. So if you think of the market as being 8 billion people who live all over the world, okay, that's not realistic for any business, right? I can't think of any business that's actually acting completely globally like that. Even more famous ones like, you know, McDonald's and Starbucks aren't operating in, say, Southern Sudan. So of the 8 billion people on the planet, who is really going to be your potential customers? You figure that out by segmenting those 8 billion people into smaller groups. And you do that based on some basic characteristics. First one I mentioned, which is the most obvious and the one that people gravitate to because it's the easiest concept to get your head around, is where are they? What's my geographic reach? Again, am I operating in metropolitan Nashville? Am I operating in Middle Tennessee? Am I operating all over the US? What's my footprint? Second is demographics. Third is behavioral. Fourth is psychographic. So we'll touch on each of these real quick. Geographic, like I said, people get their head around that one. It could be any geographic boundary, neighborhood, zip code, area code, city, county, state, countries, regions, however you slice and dice the map, okay? That one people get. Demographics refers to a group of characteristics, including gender, age, income, marital status, educational level, religious belief, race, and I'm sure there are some others. But those are basic examples of demographics. So demographic is common. You know, everybody's got their gender, everybody's got their age, everybody's got some kind of income, or religious belief, whatever. So we all share some of these characteristics, and you can help distill your target market down by this group, right? So an example would be affluent, as defined by earning over $100,000 a year, affluent males aged 34 to 55 with college degrees. That would be a demographic, okay? Behavioral characteristics talk about what should be obvious, how people behave. How are they going to want to purchase your products? Are they cool purchasing your products over the internet? Or do they want to go to a brick and mortar location? For example, I never buy shoes on the internet, right? Some people do. I don't, because I don't trust that they'll fit. So I always go to a shoe store to buy shoes. So that's how I behave. I buy my shoes at the shoe store. How do they use your products? Are your products conducive to daily usage? Will some people only use them once a week? How do they use them? And how often are customers gonna use your products, right? And how do they prefer to use the products? So those are all examples of behavior. Psychographics kind of overlap with behavioral characteristics. So these psychographics talk about what people believe and what they value, right? So pet lovers is a great one, a great example of that. You know, if you're trying to, I don't know, portable dog wash, right? And pet lovers are in your psychographics as part of an identifying characteristic for your target market, right? And there's some other examples, live music and people, outdoor activity people, people who are active lifestyles. They like to go to a random lake and go hiking or whatever. So that and environmental issues, some people are really excited about being good stewards for the planet, and that may be something that ties in with your business strategy. So all of those are examples of characteristics that one can use to identify specific target markets. A combination of geographics, demographics, behavioral characteristics, and psychographics, okay? And you can put those together in different groups. I said earlier, when you go through this exercise, you may figure out that you have more than one target market. And in doing so, you may figure out that how you reach those groups of people is maybe different, right? You might have to take a different approach to being effective in selling your service or goods to this group that you've identified as a target market, and this group that you've identified as a target market. The thing to do, however, is to go through that exercise and get those groups identified and get those characteristics and combination of characteristics distilled down as finitely as you can, so that you can focus your marketing and sales efforts on those groups. If you discover that you have more than one target market and you're trying to figure out, now what do I do? My suggestion is that you take the biggest one first and you put together an effective sales and marketing strategy to reach that biggest prospective group of folk before you go after the second group, so that you can stay focused and work on a group. Okay, everybody got this? Everybody good so far? Any questions? Nope. Okay.
Remember, you can unmute yourself or write it in the chat.
So let's talk about figuring out what market potential is, how we figure out market potential. So we talked about TAM, SAM, and SOM. We're going to drill down on those concepts, and we're going to talk about how you can figure out what the size of any given market is. So TAM is total global demand for a product or service. In today's workshop, we're all going to put on our fast food entrepreneur hats, and we're going to give thought to opening a fast food restaurant, okay? So if we were to open a fast food restaurant, and our fast food restaurant was the only fast food restaurant in the world, and we had a fast food restaurant location in every country in the world, and there were no other fast food restaurants in the world, that business would generate TAM for fast food restaurants. So global presence, no competition, every dollar spent in every country around the world on fast food would be at your restaurant. You would have the total available market. That would be your revenue. Does that make sense to everybody? Because now we're going to make it small. Because obviously, you're not going to have a restaurant in every country. And obviously, there are already competitors in the fast food market. So let's be realistic. Where are we going to have this restaurant? Let's talk about that first. So the first segment of TAM is your geographic reach. And in our example, we're going to talk about opening a restaurant in a city where there's not one of these restaurants. And we want to do a little work on the front end on projecting. And so what we want to do is we want to think about other cities that are similar. You know, you probably hear Nashville compared to Charlotte, and you hear Nashville compared to Austin. Those two comparisons I hear a lot. And so maybe, you want to look at those two markets and say, what are their food habits? What's the population like? How much money is being spent in fast food restaurants in those cities? As a starting point for figuring out whether it's a good idea or not, all right? So SAM is the demand for your type of product that you can get to. And if you're the only fast food restaurant in town, following the logic of TAM being the only fast food restaurant on the whole planet, if you were the only fast food restaurant in your town, your revenue would be the total revenue for the serviceable available market. Your revenue would be SAM. Now, everybody knows there's competition. So what portion of the serviceable addressable market can you realistically capture based on the competitive landscape within the geographic region you've identified? That is going to be your SOM, serviceable obtainable market. And who's going to go to fast food? So a lot of people like fast food restaurants out of convenience more than anything else. I don't think of anybody as being an actual fast food aficionado. Most people go to fast food restaurants that they either live or work close to. And some people may travel if your fast food restaurant is like really unique and has a little bit of buzz going on in the market. People might, drive from across town to go to your fast food restaurant maybe. But that's your serviceable obtainable market. Is the percentage or the portion of the geographic area that you've chosen to place your business in which you compete against others. How much of that business can you get or obtain? That's your SOM. And that's going to be your revenue projection for your business. Does that make sense? Everybody with me?
I don't know if this is a comment or a question. Rochelle, if you want to unmute yourself. She wrote, okay, yeah,
Go ahead.
there. You're able to
There.
unmute yourself
You're
now.
able to unmute yourself now. Yes, ma'am. I was just saying, he was just asking, before he went over all these different target markets and things like that. He was just saying, what did we understand from there? And I was just writing it in the chat. So anybody else that didn't understand, I just wrote it right there. You can
That's what I
carry
thought,
on. I'm
that it
listening.
was
That's
more
what I
of a
thought, that
statement.
it was more of a statement. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Why am I hearing that? Why am I hearing that? You guys hear an echo? Interesting. Okay. So how do you figure this out, right? That's the $64 question. So let's talk about the significance of being able to identify your serviceable obtainable market. So who will want to buy your goods and services? That's market segmentation, market identification. What's your marketing plan and your channels? How do you reach these guys, these potential customers? And what is the strength of your competition within your SAM? So thinking about all those things, when you think about all those things, if you come to the conclusion that you need to obtain a high percentage of the available market, then your probability for success is lower. So there's an inverted relationship between the amount of market that you need to be able to obtain, your market share, and your probability for success. So if you think you have to be able to obtain half the market that you've identified for your business to be success based on your cost structure, you probably got a problem. On the other hand, if you figure out that your business can be successful with only 2% market share, then your probability of success is much higher. So there's an invert relationship between percentage of market needed to be a successful business and probability of success. That make sense? Cool. That's why it matters, okay? SOM matters because it is an indicator of your potential for succeeding, especially on the short term, in short term when you're getting started. So if you need a small fraction of your market share to break even, your probability for success is higher. SOM also matters because it speaks to scalability. You probably heard people talk about how can you scale your business. If your competition is smaller, the number of competitors is smaller, and the market is big, then you've got scalability, right? The larger the markets you've identified are, the more likely you are to be able to scale. So that's another reason why SOM matters, is it talks about your not only short-term potential for success, but also your long-term potential for growth. So if there's a significant market out there that you can scale into, and your business will grow. So how do you figure out that? How do you figure out what is the size of SAM, serviceable addressable market? So you already know that you're in Nashville or Davidson County or Middle Tennessee or wherever it is you figured out you're going to run your business. Who are the target markets in that area? And how big are they? How many people meet the profiles that you've identified as your target market? What percentage of that do you need to reach to be successful? And how can you use that information to estimate your income? So that's what we're going to talk about go forward. So here we go. A little quick note before we go further. These two things are handy dandy to know when you're doing indirect research, what I call indirect research, internet-based research, when you're culling through databases and looking at statistics. Your standardized industrial code and your North American industry classification system code are handy dandy things to know. And you can find them at the website NAICS.com. So there's a little drop, you go to NAICS.com, there's a drop down one there, you put in a description of your business, and I'll tell you what your codes are. And you can use those for research. And so how do you research markets? All right. So we're going to talk about a lot of indirect resources to do business research. There are huge free databases everywhere, many of which are sponsored by the United States government. You see two of them referenced right there, Bureau of Labor Statistics and Census Bureau. Both have massive databases on business-related info. We're going to use the Census Bureau in just a minute and show you how to navigate that side, at least a little bit of that side. Another huge resource is the Nashville Library. There's an entire floor in the Nashville Library downtown main branch that's dedicated to business. And if you live in Davidson County, you can get a library card for free. If you are in one of the surrounding, I think it's seven, well, surrounding seven counties that abut against Davidson, somewhere 7 or 8. If you are in one of the adjoining counties, you can get a card for $10, $10 a year. Totally worth it. You see the website I got up there, NPL, which is Nashville Public Library, means business. If you go to there, you'll find all kinds of resources, data-driven resources where you can research business stuff. Like I said, the Census Bureau, which we're getting ready to use, I'll show you how to use it. Another great source was the trade association. And I don't care what business you are in or what business you are thinking about being in. I'm pretty sure there's a trade association for it. Just use your search engine, type in trade association for and whatever your business is, and you'll probably find one. Trade associations are handy for a couple of reasons, depending on the association. Some of them are very good at providing members with information. In one of my businesses, there was a trade association that all of my competitors and I belonged to, and we would provide that trade association monthly with sales information, and they would keep it confidential. they would consolidate it and then they would push it back out to us. And so the value of that was that on a monthly basis, you could tell if your market share was going up or down. So they would aggregate all of the sales numbers for us and all of our competitors, and everybody knew who everybody was that was a member of this association. So you could tell, and then they push it out to you, and you could take your number and figure out if it's a bigger or smaller percentage. So it was very handy. Trade associations do trade shows, and for somebody like y'all, a trade show can be really, really valuable source of information as far as like validating ideas, talking to people about who are already in the business that you are thinking about being in or just started, about the challenges they face, market conditions, competition, stuff like that. You can typically visit a trade show put on by a trade association as a guest for a nominal fee, and you can walk around and talk to people and look at competition's products or services and how they're selling their stuff and talk to the salespeople. Really, really good source of information. Some of them also publish membership lists. So you might be able to find somebody who's doing what you're doing in a different city and just ring them up and say, hey, this is who I am. I found your name through this trade association. I was wondering if you'd be willing to talk to me about your business. I'm thinking about doing the same thing. And that's a really good source. And then the last item here is the TSBDC, Tennessee State Business Development Cooperative, I think is what that is. And it's a really good website. It's got tons of resources on how to start and run a business, stuff like nuts and bolts stuff, like how to apply for a tax number, what licensing requirements you may have to have, how to get those licenses, how to register your business with the Secretary of State, basic nuts and bolts stuff, all the way up to how to put together a business plan, some more advanced stuff. So really good resource. Your tax dollars pay for it, so you might as well use it. Real quick plug for the library. The NPL means business has, like I said, tons of resources for people such as yourself. I want to focus on the databases. The data axle reference solution is a great resource for finding out information about markets and demographics of markets. Really good information there. And the Gale business databases are also really good. So those two alone worth your $10 if you have to pay. And of course, if you're in Davidson County, they're free, so it's worth every penny of that. So at this point, this is what the Census Bureau's website looks like. And this is from my slides. And I'm going to exit that. And I'm going to go share my screen with you. I think I am. Yeah.
We are seeing your presentation still.
All right. Hang on. Now what do you see? You should be seeing the Census Bureau's website.
Yes, that's what we're seeing now.
So this is the Census Bureau's website. This is no longer my slideshow. This is live on their website. You can see the stuff is hot and it moves around. And so the Census Bureau does a lot of work on understanding the population of the United States. And included in those efforts are a bunch of databases. So you go to data and maps at the website, and then you get this drop-down window, and you see in the drop-down window, there is something called data tools and apps. You click on data tools and apps, you get a menu of data tools and apps that the Census Bureau provides. Whoop. What did I just do? There we go. And you scroll through these and there's a whole long list of them. But today, what I want to use is this. Census Business Builder data tool. And if you read the description, it says that the Census Business Builder data tool offers small business owners, Census Bureau, and other statistics to guide their research for opening or expanding a business. Sounds like something we could use as we try to figure out our little fast food restaurant. So you click on that, and it takes you to that database, which has got a little plug for itself, but you enter into it. And what you're going to get is a map. Of the United States. So there's the interactive map. And you can see that down here is where you're going to get some data once you start putting in parameters. Down here is a little color-coded map of population by state. So if you're thinking about, you know, your business in terms of where do people live, this map starts with that. Obviously, California, New York, Florida, more populated than Kansas and Nebraska. But you can start by dividing this up. And since we started with geography in our market segmentation exercise, then that's what we're going to do here. Now, we're going to think about opening a fast food restaurant, and we're going to do it by zip code. Because I think a great place for a fast food restaurant in metropolitan Nashville is probably where a bunch of kids are. And there's a bunch of kids down there by Vanderbilt and Belmont. And so I just happen to know that zip code is 37212. And I put in 37212 in this window up here, and it asked me to confirm that. And click on it, confirms it. And you see the map is now focused on not the United States, but zip code 37212. And some of this data starts getting filled in. So a couple points, data points, median household income, high school degrees, how many people live there. Start getting some data points filled in, okay? So these people are relatively affluent. I'm opening a restaurant. I need people to have some kind of ability to spend money on food outside the home. So knowing that they have an income that's well above the national average is good. There's 20,000 of them. I don't know, is that enough to support my restaurant? If not, maybe I'll move to a different zip code, which by the way, I can do by just moving my cursor around and clicking on this map. I can change zip codes. But I need more information. So if you come over here and you drop down, you can start dividing this information up and get it more selective, more segmentation. So we've segmented by area and a zip code. That's our first segmentation. But we need some other segmentation. So you see the options here for your primary. You can get how many people live there, how they spend their money, workforce info, building permits, so on and so forth. So let's take residents as our first variable, and let's ask for total population. Okay. And then let's go to our secondary variable up here. And you see that we've got socioeconomic characteristics, housing characteristics, employment characteristics, and demographic characteristics. And again, take total pop. And then when I close this window, now you'll see that there's some stuff being filled in down here and over here. And one more thing that we want to do is we want to talk about our business. We're going to open a fast food restaurant. And if you pull this custom industries, all sectors, you click on that, you get a drop-down window. You can click on edit industries. Look at there, food services, and under food services is fast food. Boom, it drops it in. And oh, by the way, it gives you your NAICS code when you do that. So that's another source for getting your NAICS code. And now we've got some variables dropped in here, right? So we're trying to segment this market. by geography, and we want to find out some stuff about the people who live in this zip code, right? So you've got the overview here, but if you see down here, there's a little create a report, and you click on that, and it will generate a report for you. So it'll tell you about your customers and the competitors and compare your business and so on. So let's look at some of this data. There's our map. Unfortunately, when you go zip code, you don't get a lot of data. Like some of the stuff doesn't fill out because the geographic region is so small, the data doesn't exist. But a lot of data does exist. So let's look at the first drop down that we get here. Well, what does it say? Demographic characteristics, okay? So in zip code 37212, I can find out a lot about the people who live there. Who are they? Well, there's 20,000 of them. They're 45% male and 55% female. Here's their age group breakout, right? So 18 years and older, 90% of these people, so 18,000 of them are potential fast food customers for us, right? But if we weren't doing a fast food restaurant, we would still have valuable information here, right? Maybe we've identified a target market by race. So here are the various breakouts of race in that area. Age, working age, gender, ages by percentage. All information that somebody who's starting a business could put to use, right? Next drop-down window, socioeconomic characteristics. How much money do these people own? Median household income, average income. Look at that. These people are affluent. They're all educated. Of course they are. They're going to Belmont and Vandy. So it then shouldn't surprise anyone that 95% of them have a high school degree. 77% of them have a bachelor's degree. So this is a well-educated, highly affluent population. Depending on what your business is, that may be a target market, right? Well-educated, affluent people might be your target market. And then you could go back up here and say, well, I need guys between the ages of that are over 21 years of age. So I've got 9,000 men, 60% of them, so 600. I got 5,400 men who are affluent and have a bachelor's degree in that area. Does that support my business? Yes or no? I don't know. Depends on your business. But you can also see employment data, health insurance. Do they have health insurance? There's data here on commutes, work from home, how much time do they spend in the car, so on. All data that, again, depending on what your business idea or business is, you can use to figure out the answer to the question in that zip code. Does it make sense for me business-wise or potentially business-wise? Now, I'm opening a fast food restaurant. So I got a bunch of young people who are affluent in that area. Next box is housing characteristics. This is particularly helpful if your business is real estate oriented. So housing units, rent versus own, ownership rate, how valuable are the homes, so on and so forth. And then last, no, not last, next, how are these people employed? It tells you what people do here. Not surprisingly, education, right, is the highest population, highest vocation in that area. You got 2 universities there, so there you go. But it tells you what people do, okay? And then go down here, and again, because we used a zip code, a lot of this data doesn't get filled out. But for our purposes, there's some really cool data that does get filled out, and that is how these people spend their money. I'm opening a restaurant. do these people spend money on restaurants? Well, fortunately, the answer is apparently yes. So here's the total amount of expenditures, consumer expenditures per household. Again, this is an affluent neighborhood, so they spend a lot of money. And here's how they spend it. One of the biggest numbers is food away from home. Voila. So I'm thinking about opening a fast food restaurant. I'm looking at an area, I'm trying to find a place where I got relatively affluent young people who spend money away from home on food. Looks like I got a good place, right? And I've verified all that with this data. And you can see there's a ton of data here about how people spend their money. So depending on what your business looks like, you can find out for any given geographic region. And again, remember that this footprint is vastly expandable. I could ask for this data for the entire United States of America. I could ask for this data for several counties, right? I could put in like the 9-county Middle Tennessee area. I could have put in Davidson County. Could put in the whole state of Tennessee. So you can expand this and get the same data for whatever you feel like your geographic footprint is, right? And you can get all this stuff. So it tells you how people are spending their money on clothes, and I mean it's broken down very finitely in all kinds of different kind of clothes. And do they have pet food and pet services? They spend money on that kind of stuff. On and on. So again, depending on what your business is, you can figure out how much money people are spending in your identified market on your business. And you can see it's broken down. There's a lot of data there, right? Okay. So that's real quick how one can use Census Bureau data to help figure out the answer to the question, is there potential for my business concept in the area I've identified that I want to operate in, right? So how do you use this information? That's the key question, right? How do you use it? How do we use this information? So let me go back to my presentation. And we will pick up where we left off.
Any questions or comments about the census page? You are all able to speak, so if you have any, you can either write it on the chat or just unmute yourselves.
Okay. Everybody with me on this? Hopefully you are. That's awesome. All right, so this is where we were. And we started on the Census Bureau's homepage. And we walked through these steps. There's the drop-down window for the databases. And there's the Census Business Builder database. And there's the page, and there's the map. And there's the segmentation, 37212. And there's the primary and secondary variables. And we customized our industry. And we got some data. And then we looked at that data. And you're like, okay, Cal, that's cool. There's a bunch of data there. How do we use that? By the way, there's the NAICS code for fast food. I told you it would pull it up for you. It's right there on the business summary. And also in the employer business, it tells you how many people, how many other businesses are in the geographic area that you identified that are running fast food restaurants. So there are 10 fast food restaurants in zip 37212. My guess is there are probably more than that, but that's what the Bureau says. So that's what we're going to use. Okay. So I want to open a fast food. I think I want to open a fast food restaurant, and I think I want to do it down by the schools. And I'm trying to figure out how I use some data to project my revenues. And so I'm just gonna invite somebody to speak up and tell me, based on the data that you saw in zip code 37212, and with the idea of opening a fast food restaurant, what data is relative or relevant to trying to figure out the answer to this question? Is opening this fast food restaurant down by the schools, is that a good business decision? Anybody? What variables would you look at? Come on, I know y'all smarter than that. Nope. Nobody confident in what they think?
Cynthia wrote in the chat, expendable income or disposable income. Rochelle.
That would be one. Yep, absolutely. Even more so, Rochelle, is we looked at money that they spent on eating out, right? There was a line item there on money spent dining out, right? That would be a pretty valuable piece of data, I think. All right, so let me answer the question for you. So we know from the data that there were 8,306 households in zip code 37212. Y'all will remember that number, it was there. And we know that they spend, of those households are spending $5,910.82, pretty precise number. They're spending that annually dining out. So 8,306 households spending on average $5,900 to dine out every year. Now, I'm trying to figure out what? I'm trying to figure out TAM. Right? No, excuse me, SAM. I'm trying to figure out what's the serviceable addressable market look like for a fast food restaurant in zip 37212. And I'm looking at two variables. How many households, how much do they spend going out? I multiply those together and I get $49 million potential market. So the SAM for a fast food restaurant in zip code 37212 is the total number of households multiplied by their spending on dining out. 49 million bucks. That's a pretty big number. I don't think I have to have too much of that number to be successful in my business, because I don't think my business expenses are gonna be anywhere near $50 million. I wouldn't hope so. Does this make sense to everybody? Everybody with me on this? All right, so that's the SAM. What does that mean to me? I already know there's 10 competitors in that marketplace, right? So I'm trying to figure out what my revenue might actually look like. So we want SAM. We want to know what our obtainable market share is. So we already know what the addressable market is. What's the obtainable market? Anybody? So we identified SAM as the households times money spent dining out, $49 million. The Bureau told us that there were 10 fast food service businesses in the area that we've identified in our geographic footprint. There were 10 other fast food services, right? So we're going to be the 11th business competing in that market for people's fast food restaurant business. So we're going to have 1/11 of the SAM. All things being equal, we should get 1/11 of those spend dollars on people dining out in that zip. We should get 1/11 of that, right? So simple arithmetic, 1/11 of $49 million equals $4,462,000. Okay. So if you've done your research and you've identified your space and you know what your lease is going to be and you know what your utilities are going to be and you know how many people you need to staff and you know how much your food's going to cost and you know what your insurance is going to cost, and you've got your cost structure identified and quantified, the question then becomes, is it more than $4,462,000? If the answer to that question is yes, you obviously have a problem. Back to my point from several slides ago, if your number is a lot smaller than that, if your total operating expense is $500,000, then that means you don't have to get 1/11 of the available market to be successful, right? You only got to get what, a 20th of it. So your chances of getting a 20th as opposed to an 11th of a market is more probable, smaller the share, higher the probability, more likely you're going to be successful, right? That's how you use that arithmetic. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, now I'm going to show you how a client of mine, a score client of mine, actually used this kind of information to open a restaurant. So this young lady had worked in a restaurant in Albany, New York. And so she had, intimate knowledge of that business. She knew how many customers they serviced every month. She knew what the average sales ticket was for the customers that came in. And she believed that this restaurant concept would be successful in Nashville. And she was going to open a place here in Nashville. And she wanted to be confident. And so she started to do some research. So what she did was she lined up some demographic data for the two cities, Albany and Nashville, next to each other. Compared. So she started out with just total population, raw number. How many people live here? How many people live there? Of course, Davidson County, metropolitan Nashville is much bigger than Albany, New York. Notice that she also picked on median household incomes. Okay, so she compared the median household incomes and she looked at the total number of people. Then she broke the people down by age groups, by metro area. And you'll see in a minute why she did this, because she knows what the age group for the target market is based on actual clients in Albany. So she knows the customer base in Albany. She knew what they look like, age-wise. And so she wanted to take that and extrapolate it to the same population in Nashville. So she's got it broken down. Albany versus Nashville by age group, okay? So here's how she used this data. She compared the total population in both cities. She knows that the customers that frequent this particular type of restaurant fall into an age group, 15 to 54. And she knows from comparing the data that represented 58% of Albany's market. So 58% of all of the 97,000 people who live in Albany are between the ages of 15 and 54. 62% of the people who live in Nashville are between the ages of 15 and 54, okay? That's just by age for target market. She also knows that people who earn less than $30,000 don't spend a lot of money out on food away from home, which is logical. People with salaries over $30,000 tend to spend about $3,000. Now we know in our example they're spending almost $6,000. So she's just going to roll with the $3,000 and say that 79% of the people between the ages, for target ages 50 to 54, fall into that range of salaries, 30 and above. Okay. So in order to figure out what her SAM is, she said that the total population of Albany multiplied by the percentage of those people who fall in between the ages of 15 and 54, multiplied by the percentage of those people who earn $30,000 a year or more, gave her a total SAM in Albany of 45,221 people. Applying the same arithmetic to Nashville, with a total population of, at the time, 669,000 people, 62% of whom fall in her age range, 15 to 54, and 79% of whom earn over $30,000, would yield a SAM of 332,854 people. So she's like, absolutely, I got a hugely bigger potential market here than I did in Albany. Everybody tracking this logic? All right, we're going to go next step on how she used this. So she did a little extra research, and she's like, household incomes in Nashville are higher than Albany. I've got 6 times potential customers based on segmentation by age and earnings. And there are more people in Nashville with higher household incomes. So it just seems logical that based on this information, this concept would be successful in Nashville, right? I mean, I track that logic. So here's how she uses to project her revenues. Again, she has intimate knowledge of the Albany operation. She worked there, she knows the data. 4,984 customers per month. That represents 11% of what she identified as her total market. So she's identified her song as 4,985, 4,984. That makes sense? She identified her song, or SAM of 45,000 based on what she in Albany. There were 45,000 people that met the criteria for her market segmentation. She knows that the actual customer base was only 11% of that. So that's her song, 11%. She knows that those people spent $15 a visit, and so their total monthly revenue was just about $75,000. So she uses that logic that says the target market I've identified in Nashville at 332,854 people. If I get 11% of that as my song, that would represent 36,614 customers per month. Assuming that their spend is the same, $15 a customer, I'm going to have a monthly revenue of $550,000. Wow, that's a big deal. Now, there are flaws in her logic. Can anybody identify the flaws in her logic? Well, let me first ask you, does everybody track the logic on what she's done here as a revenue projection exercise? Everybody track that logic? She identified her target market, 15 to 54-year-old making over $30,000 a year. She identified, so that's her SAM. She identified her song based on actual information. She knew that she was drawing 11% of the market in Albany, 11% of her SAM, her identified SAM. She knew that. So she just assumes that she'll be drawing 11% of the identified SAM in Nashville. It's a safe assumption to make. Same sales price, revenue number. Everybody tracking that? So there's some issues here with her logic. One is that Nashville is way bigger than Albany. And so is it realistic for her to think that she's going to draw 11% of the total population of Davidson County to a fast food restaurant located somewhere? Is that logical, rational, reasonable? I argue no, it's not. People in Gallatin aren't going to drive to, I don't know, Bellevue to go to a fast food restaurant. more than likely, unless it's like really incredible. And most fast food restaurants aren't really incredible, to be honest. So her comparison for her SAM is not legit, right? And so my suggestion to her when she came to me with this was to think about shrinking your footprint and look at a zip code rather than complete Davidson County. So that was one flaw logic, okay? And the other question that I had for her was, well, assuming you can do that volume of business, what is your cost structure going to look like? Because your restaurant in Albany servicing just under 5,000 people a month is going to look a lot different than your restaurant in Nashville if your traffic flow projection is correct at 60,000 people. How are you going to service that business? Your business is going to look a lot different, right? So my suggestion to her was shrink your footprint, open a restaurant, see how successful it is, go with multiple locations in different areas based on demographics. And the other thing was, do we even know that the people in Nashville are going to eat this stuff? I mean, upstate New York versus deep South Tennessee, are people's tastes the same? Are people going to like this stuff? I don't know. How do you find out? Well, I suggested that once a year in Nashville, there's an event, and I can't remember the name of it, that is held down at Centennial Park, which is basically a food fair, and restaurants have pop-up tents, and people meander around all day long and sample food stuff. And, for a few $100s, you can get yourself a tent there, and you can take your food, and you can take a survey, and you can let people taste your food, and you can ask them 4 or 5 simple questions about what they experienced. And you could find out whether people like this stuff or not before you spend a whole bunch of money on a lease and all that. So you want to validate your concept before you spend a lot of money. So this is direct research as opposed to indirect research. And you should always use some direct research methodology to support your thesis that you've already supported with indirect data research, right? So your indirect data research is more of the statistical stuff. Are there enough people who fit the demographics and characteristics of the target markets I've identified, where I'm planning on running my business? Are enough of them there to support my business? Yes or no? All data driven. Soft stuff is, well, do they like my product? Do they need my service? How do I find that out? Well, you're gonna have to, it's a full contact sport at this point, right? You're gonna have to touch them, find out. So do direct research to substantiate your indirect research. That's the message. And then the other thing is like, what's the competitive environment? And also, how long is it going to take you to reach full potential? So you see the graph down there, bottom right, product life cycle. That goes, so you can actually think of that as like a sales life cycle. Where you start out at 0, and over time, hopefully, your sales ramp up as people become familiar with your product and or service, and word spreads and your business grows. But at some point, you're going to peak out, right? I mean, why do companies offer new products? Why do restaurants change their menus? Because they peak out. The thing to think about in a startup mode is how long does it take you to reach break even? So when you're projecting your revenues based on your data, your indirect research, and you're projecting a revenue stream, obviously, in our example, you're not going to hit 1/11 of $5 million month 1, right? You're going to have a ramp up. What does that ramp up look like? How long does it take you to hit not maturity, but break even? Well, how long does it take you to get to the point where your revenues are going to offset your total costs so that your business stands on its own feet financially? That's a key thing to understand. And it's a function of market share, marketing, sales strategy, cost structure. Okay. So let me give you another example. So we've been talking about basically a service industry, fast food restaurant, how she used information to figure out her song and some of the challenges with her logic. I have another client who works whose full-time job is he's a stagehand. He works with a local artist who tour, and he's a stagehand. He sets them up, he knocks them down. And in the process of his day job, or more likely night job, he identified an issue with keyboard players and keyboards. And that is that keyboards have at least one pedal. All keyboards have at least one pedal called sustaining pedal that the artist will use repetitively throughout the performance. The sustaining pedal basically changes the tone of the keyboard sound. And so they're constantly hitting this pedal. And the pedals are hard and the stage surfaces are hard. And what happens is the pedal will creep away from the artist during the show. And so the pedal gets further and further away to the point where the artist is having a hard time reaching it. And so most artists deal with this phenomenon by simply duct taping their pedals to the stage, and the venues hate it because it leaves this sticky residue on the stage. And after just a few artists perform at a venue, they don't set their keyboards all at the same place. And so now you got these sticky spots all over your stage. And so he was trying to figure out a solution to this. And he did. He came up with a means by which keyboard artists can grip, I think it's probably the best word, grip their pedal to the stage floor without using a sticky substance. And it's kind of like it's a combination of Velcro and the material that people put on the rugs to keep them from sliding. Combination of those two assembled with some fabric, and you wrap around your pedal and you set pedal on the floor, and it doesn't slide anymore. So he invented this thing. When I met this person, he had prototypes. He had spent literally thousands of dollars on patent attorney and patent research. He had spent thousands of dollars on getting his prototype done. He had already lined up a manufacturer, somebody who would make these for him. He had already set up a Shopify account to let Shopify be his front office and back office. He was into this thing for 10 grand. And then he meets with me as his score mentor. And I say to him, first thing I ask him is, what's the size of the market? And he didn't know. And he was already into this thing for thousands of dollars. And in my mind, I'm like, you may just be out, because I didn't know what the market was for. I'd never heard of a sustaining pedal, so I had no idea. So at the conclusion of our first meeting, I said to him, we need to figure this out. We need to know what the market potential for this product is before you spend another dime on this. Then shut it down, figure this out. So here's what he did. Bottom left-hand corner of this slide, you'll see the source, which is a company called IBIS World. They're a market research firm. They're not free. You have to pay them. And sometimes it's not inexpensive, but you can give them parameters for market research, and they will do market research for you within the parameters you give them. So depending on your appetite for expenditures and the complexity of your business, if it warrants this kind of expense, they can do some pretty good work for you, I think. My particular client, whom I said don't spend another dime on this, did not pay for this. He had a friend who was in the wholesale business who had this information. So we were able to find out how many keyboard units are being sold, right? So if you're making an accessory for keyboards, your installed base is keyboards. And potentially every keyboard needs one of these things. So you got keyboards over 100, 200 bucks, keyboards under 200 bucks, total units sold in the United States. There's 10 years worth of data here. How many units are being sold? And here they are. So we now know how many units are being sold. And here's how he used this information to appease his mentor who was challenging him on the viability of his business. He says, here's 10 years worth of data. Just add up the 10 years unit sale, divide by 10, simple arithmetic. Million units being sold in the United States, plus or minus every year. So 1 million keyboards are being sold in the United States every year. That means that there are 1 million new units going into the market that could be potential customers for this accessory, this pedal brake thing, right? He knows, because he's in that business, that keyboards have a useful life of about 8 years. So what's his SAM? Given these two pieces of data, what is his SAM? Anybody? Somebody tell me what his SAM is. All right. Average annual sales times the useful life of a keyboard plus this year's sales volume. Does that make sense? So there's 8 years worth of previous sales worth of keyboards out there in the marketplace. This year there's going to be another 1 million units sold. So 8 prior years units plus this year's units gives me a SAM of 9,576,000 units. So the SAM potential for his keyboard accessory, 9,500,000 units. That's a lot of units. Now, this guy sells these things for 35 bucks a pop. And it's all internet driven. He doesn't have any inventory. All of his orders are made to order. And Spotify, Shopify is running his front and back office for him. He's got a web presence. He pays Shopify. He pays the manufacturer. He gets 35 bucks a unit. How many units does he need to sell to have a pretty viable business? I mean, there's 9,576 potential sales out there. What does he have to say? I mean, if he gets 1% of that at 35 bucks a unit, what's that work out to? I got to calculate it. 9,500,000 units times 0.01 times 35. If he got 1% of his SAM, he'd be generating $332,500 a year at 1% market share. So, logical conclusion is, yeah. Given that I have basically zero cost structure, by the way, one of the beauties of his business is all his costs are variable costs. He doesn't have any fixed costs at all. He's got a manufacturer who makes these to order. He's got Shopify running his front and back office for him. All he has to do is maintain his website. No fixed costs. Well, I guess your website has an annual fee, but that's it. All of his costs are variable. They're all tied to units. He creates expense when he sells a unit. If he doesn't sell any units, he's getting no expense. So it's a really cool business. And if he just gets 1% market share, it's a $300,000 a year business. And let's not forget, this is a side hustle for this guy. He's got a real job. So just carry that one step further. What if you got 3%? Because Matt got $1 million business at 3% market penetration. He's got $1 million business. Okay, show you how another client of mine did the same thing. So this person, we talked about being concerned with the environment as a psychographic characteristic that one can use in target marketing strategy, target marketing exercise, right? So people who are interested in protecting the planet. So I have a client who, as you see, and this slide, by the way, is the cover slide from her investor's pitch deck. So she put this pitch deck together, used it to present to prospective investors as a way to try to raise capital. She was trying to raise not very much capital, honestly, so $75,000. So she has this investor's slide presentation. This is her cover sheet. And you see it refers to sustainable, non-toxic, healthy for the home and planet furniture. That is a psychographic, right? People who had that interest. And so she was trying to figure out market size, market share. What percent do I have to be successful? All the things we've been talking about this morning. And so she found this resource from Grand View Research. Again, my guess is this was paid research. And she's wanted to find out what the ecologically friendly furniture addressable market is. And they did the research, and they got a nice little adder to this research, which is potential growth over the next 7 years. You see on the right, US market CAGR, 2023 to 2030, 7.5%. Anybody know what CAGR stands for? It's cumulative average growth rate. It's a fancy way of saying that they expect the size of the market to expand by 7.5% per year, each year for the next 7 years. Okay. And they told her that in 2021, that the eco-friendly furniture business, not just the furniture business, eco-friendly furniture business in the United States was a almost $15 billion business. And so she's selling these products, web-based business in the United States. So that's her SAM. She calls it total addressable market, but it's really serviceable addressable market because she's already limited it to US. But there it is, $15 billion market potential, right? So if she got SAM, her business would generate $15 billion in revenue. So here's how she used the data. She identified through another source called Statista that 25% of the furniture bought by shoppers in the United States is bought online. There's a $15 billion market for eco-friendly furniture in the United States. So she concludes that 25% of that is going to be bought over the internet. That would represent $3.75 billion, what she calls SAM, which is actually correct. So she's identified her serviceable addressable market as $3.75 billion, 25% of the total $15 billion that's being bought online. She says there's $3.75 billion out there. I'm going to try to get 1/2 of 1% of that. That's my goal. 1/2 of 1% of the SAM, which is really SAM. 1/2 of 1% of SAM is going to be her SAM. So she said that's $18.75 million. If I get 1/2 of 1% of the market that I've identified, eco-friendly web bought furniture in the US. 1/2 of 1%, I got an $18+ million business. And then she's also some of the bullet points here. Not a lot of people doing this. I mean, I've never heard of anybody focused specifically on eco-friendly furniture before this. And she highlights her own skills sets in this. She's been engaged in sustainability concepts for 30 years. So she's got knowledge of that. So she points that out. But she's used that data to say, look, 1/2 of 1% of this market is an $18.75 million business. Easy breezy. So that's how she used it, okay? And that says, and again, her business, virtually no cost business. Web-based driven. She keeps no inventory. The orders go directly to the manufacturers. Shopify is running her back office. Her costs are almost all variable. It's clean. Okay. Does everybody understand these concepts? Anybody have any questions at this point about how you identify, how you segment, how you use segmentation to identify within a certain area what the potential for your market is and how you convert that information into a dollar amount? Everybody got those concepts? Because they're pretty important, especially when you go to put together a business plan. Okay, I assume that's a yes. And so I'm going to show you one more way that you can do some quick research. I would call this not a sophisticated kind of back of the envelope, but takes only about 5 minutes to do it. And so if you think you've got this great idea and you want to take one short step towards validation without doing all the Census Bureau research and whatever, this is kind of quick and dirty way to get an idea of any potential that an idea may have. And so in this example, we're going to talk about selling sports apparel to teenagers, okay? And so this business has been selling t-shirts to football players, high school football players. But the business owner has noticed that cheerleaders are buying these t-shirts. Fancy that. And so the thought occurs to this person that, well, if cheerleaders are buying it, why don't I just target some merchandise to cheerleaders? Maybe there's, a different t-shirt that's more cheerleader specific than just the football t-shirts that have the team logos on. So let me explore that. Now, if you have a Facebook business page, you can do this. Well, on your Facebook business page, you have the ability to create an ad for your business, okay? So you go to the create an ad icon, you click on that, you pull this box pops up. And you have to put in an address to suggest an ad. And you also have to put in a picture. Now, it doesn't matter what the picture is because the internet, it's not that smart, although getting scarily smarter. But you can put in a picture of anything. So, but my point being is for your football t-shirts, you don't have to put in a picture of a football. You can put in a picture of your dog. It doesn't matter. But you've got to put in a picture or it won't let you advance. So once you put in an address and a picture, you can advance to design your ad. Notice the page says up here that you are designing your ad, okay? So once you do that, you get this page. And right up here it says ad targeting FAQs. And over here, what's it say? Targeting. Target market. And below that, you got what? Location, geographics, demographics, likes and interest, what we call either behavioral or psychographics, right? So there it is. Facebook's got it figured out. Where are you selling this stuff? Who are you selling it to? And what do they like? So in our example, we're going to say that we're going to sell these in Georgia. You see here, state, province. You can click everywhere, or you can pick a city. We picked Georgia. The demographics, high school kids. How old are the high school kids? They're between the ages of 13 and 18. Sexes, men, women, or both. All. I like that, all. So we've got all sexes between the ages of 13 and 18 in Georgia who have expressed an interest or likes in cheerleaders. Facebook knows what you like. You are the product on Facebook. When you're on Facebook and you're talking to your friends on Facebook and yada, 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 they're scraping data. And so they know how many people who are Facebook users in the state of Georgia between the ages of 13 and 18 have expressed an interest in cheerleader. They know that. And so they give you an opportunity to segment your market by state, age, and interest. And there it is. You've segmented it. Georgia teenagers who have expressed an interest in cheerleaders. How many of them are there? There's 8,340 of them. 8,340 teenagers have expressed an interest. Teenage Facebook users in Georgia have expressed an interest in cheerleading. Does that mean that there's a good market for your shirts? Yes or no? I don't know. But I would suggest that you go back and you do the same thing. And instead of cheerleading, you put in football and see what that number looks like. And if that number is close to the 8,300 people that are cheerleading and you have a viable business based on selling t-shirts to football players in Georgia, then you're probably going to have a pretty decent business selling t-shirts that target cheerleaders in Georgia, numbers being the same. If you do that exercise, that segmentation exercise, and you find out that there are 250,000 Facebook users who are interested in football in Georgia, and there's only 8,300 of them that express cheer, then maybe not. See what I'm saying? So just compare. But it's easy, quick, easy. It took us, what, less than 5 minutes to do that? And you can get a quick idea of whether the idea seems to have feet. Does it have any legs? Will it stand? I don't know. Okay. So we've spent a lot of time talking about researching your markets, but we've talked about primarily researching markets on an indirect basis, data-driven from reliable sources, so that you can have a top-line revenue estimate that you can support with data and logic. All right. My logic is my top-line projection is this. My logic behind that is this. And here's the data that supports my logic. That's kind of how you want to piece that together for your business plan and your pro forma P&L, right? The other part of it is you need to be able to validate so that you can tell your story. So if you go through this exercise, go back to my young lady client who was doing the restaurant. And she reaches the conclusion that she reached. Yeah, I think it's viable. We asked those questions, but yeah, will anybody buy it? Who knows? Well, you need to find these things out. We talked a little bit about how to do it here. Do a survey, do a focus group, do some interviews, go to trade shows, put together a questionnaire, offer up a sample of your product or service to a focus group, and then give them a questionnaire or a survey. Go to a trade show and walk around and look at what people are doing in the business that you're thinking about getting in or are already in, what the competition is doing, how are they advertising, how are they marketing. Join a trade association that, depending on your business, you might be able to join a trade association that compiles data that you can use to validate, your assumptions. But you need some direct source stuff, especially if it's a product. Excuse me. Especially if it's a product, people gotta, touch it, taste it, feel it, give you feedback on it. Couple of heads up on doing this kind of stuff. I'll sum those 2 bullet points up by saying, be honest with yourself. So if you're putting together a questionnaire or a survey, be aware of the tendency to favorably frame. And what I mean by favorably frame is that you construct a question in such a way is that it will elicit the response that you want. Another way of saying that is make sure your questions are neutral questions. So in the example of a food, if we're giving samples of our food away, the question we might ask someone is, did you like it? Yes or no? Right? Instead of what did it taste like? So make sure your survey questions are neutral so that you're not framing the responses in a way that elicits a response that kind of meets your want, which is you want your business to be successful or you want your product or service to be received favorably, but don't lie to yourself about it, right? Let the feedback be constructive, real feedback. Same thing with interpretation bias. Once you put a survey together or a questionnaire together and you start reading the responses, you have to avoid the tendency to interpret them in such a way that supports your business plan, as opposed to interpreting them as the way they were presented. And so how you ask your questions will, to a great extent, drive the responses you get. Ask your questions in such a way that they are less likely to be interpreted in, let me say, nebulous ways. In other words, ask a yes and no question. Ask yes and no question. Did you like it? Yes or no? Then you might be able to say, what is it about it that you did like, or what is it about it that you didn't like, and get a more expansive response. But, you know, top line questions, black and white, don't leave room for interpretation that might influence your decision on whether you're gonna go forward or not. Again, don't lie to yourself. It's a trap. So here's what we did today. Talk about how you can define your target markets. And again, I will emphasize that the S is in parentheses there because you may have more than one. You can segment by demographics, geographics, behavior, and thoughts. You can use those 4 things to try to figure out who these people who might want to use your product or service are. And then you can start figuring out where they are. So how many of them are there in the location I've identified as my market, geographically, my total available market? How many of those people can I serve? And how many of them can I actually expect to serve or obtain? And then support your market research with surveys, trade show visits, questionnaires, samples, trade fairs, so, okay? That's it. So you will receive from SCORE an email with this presentation in it. And it will also have a workshop evaluation form. If you would so kindly, please fill that out and return it. Helps me get better at this, helps these workshops be more valuable for future participants. And I would appreciate it if you would do that. So there you go. I'm hopeful that you found this relevant and educational and valuable. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Carl, for the workshop. For all of you, as Carl said, you will receive an email. The slides will be in that email. And we really, really appreciate if you fill out the feedback form. If you don't have any other questions, Carl and I will be here a couple more minutes if anyone has questions. But if you are all set, you can start leaving the workshop now.
Yeah, happy to answer any questions anybody's got.
Cody, Josh, Uchenna, does any of you have questions?
Doesn't look like it, does it?
Power station can run your fridge for.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think we can call it, Carl. Thank you for your time today and for sharing all this knowledge. And
course.
I know they will use it and become better entrepreneurs because of it. Thanks.
No worries.